Bad soil doesn't mean you can't grow vegetables. It means nobody's told you which vegetables have been quietly waiting for exactly those conditions your whole gardening life. You don't need raised beds trucked in with bagged topsoil. You don't need $40 of soil amendments from the garden center every spring. And you don't need a soil testing kit sitting in a drawer telling you what you already know, that your dirt is hard, pale, and cracks in the summer heat. Here's what you actually need: the right 10 vegetables. Because there's a small group of crops that don't just survive in poor soil, they perform better in it. Less fungal disease, less rot, root systems that push down deep instead of sitting shallow and thirsty. Which means less watering for you, less babysitting, and a harvest that shows up whether or not you remembered to feed the bed this year. Before we get into the list, comment your soil type below: clay, sandy, rocky, or chalky. Because not every one of these 10 works for every soil, and I want you scrolling straight to the entries that match what you're actually working with in your own yard. And here's a reason to stick around to the end. One vegetable on this list has been measured putting down roots over 6 feet into compacted, nutrient-poor ground, deeper than most trees in a home garden. And it does that specifically because the soil is bad, not in spite of it. Give that same plant rich, loose, well-fed soil, and it actually produces less. I'll tell you exactly which one, and exactly why, when we get there. So if you've been staring at hard, pale, cracked dirt, thinking your growing season is over, before it started, stick with me. We're about to go through 10 vegetables that were built for exactly the soil you've got. Let's start with entry number 1. Number 10, Jerusalem artichoke. What do you do with clay so compacted a fork bounces off it in August? You plant Jerusalem artichokes and let them do the work. This isn't a vegetable that tolerates compacted clay, it breaks it. The tubers push through dense layers that stop most root crops cold, fracturing soil structure, and pulling organic matter down with them season after season. Plant once, and you're running a slow soil remediation project that also feeds you. Here's what most gardeners never hear. Jerusalem artichokes sold in stores are almost always harvested too early. Left in the ground through the first hard frost, the tubers convert stored inulin, which tastes starchy and slightly metallic, into fructose. Sweeter, nuttier, and nothing like what you'd buy at a supermarket. They can't wait for frost. You can. Plant them 4 to 6 inches deep, 12 inches apart, in the worst patch of your clay bed. Do not add compost or manure. Extra nitrogen pushes the plant into 6-foot stalks with almost nothing underground. Lean soil keeps the energy in the tuber, exactly where you want it. Number 9. Parsnip. Got sandy soil that drains so fast you can water in the morning and have dust by noon? That's not a problem for parsnips. That's their ideal address. Most root vegetables fork or rot in sandy conditions, chasing inconsistent moisture. Parsnips drive straight, sometimes 18 inches deep, with no obstructions and no rot pressure. The result is long, clean roots that look nothing like the stubby, branched specimens pulled from heavier ground. The insider fact: parsnips are a sweetening crop, and sandy soil is a large part of why. Without consistent moisture, the roots experience mild drought stress that concentrates sugar. It's the same principle behind dry farming tomatoes, but parsnips do it naturally, with no intervention required. Direct sow 1/2 inch deep, thinning to 6 inches apart once seedlings reach 2 inches tall. Don't add fresh manure or high nitrogen fertilizer. Fresh organic matter causes aggressive forking as roots chase nutrients. Let the sand work. Sparse, mineral-poor, and fast-draining is exactly what a parsnip is looking for. No. 8. Chicory. If your soil is chalky, pale, stony, bone-dry in summer, with a pH sitting at 7.5 or higher, most vegetables will struggle to uptake iron and manganese, and you'll see it in yellowing leaves and stunted growth. Chicory doesn't just tolerate those conditions. Alkaline soil is where it builds its most concentrated flavor compounds. Chicory grown in rich, acidic, well-fed beds turns mild, almost bland. Grown in chalky, lean, high pH ground, it develops a structured bitterness that European cuisine uses deliberately. Italian growers seek out thin, mineral soils specifically for this reason. What looks like a limitation is a quality signal. The insider fact: chicory root from alkaline soil was historically roasted as a coffee substitute, and still is in parts of France and Louisiana. The compounds responsible for that depth of flavor are exactly what chalk soil draws out. Give it better conditions, and you lose the whole point. Sow seeds on the surface, pressing them lightly in. No more than a 1/4 inch of cover. Never add lime or wood ash to the bed. You're working with the alkalinity, not correcting it. Leave the pH exactly where it is. If you've already grown any of these and written them off as too bitter or too stubborn, let me know in the comments. I want to hear what soil you had, because that changes everything. Number 7. Radish. Rocky, stony ground that shatters spades and bends garden forks. The kind most gardeners spend weekends trying to clear. Stop clearing it. Plant radishes. Radishes grown in smooth, well-tilled, stone-free beds grow fast and soft. Hollow at the center, watery in flavor, almost no heat. Rocky soil forces the root to push against resistance, building cellular density as it grows. That's where the crunch comes from. That's where the bite develops. The radish pulled from compacted, stony ground is structurally different from the one grown in a pampered, raised bed. The insider fact: daikon radishes are used commercially as a tillage crop. Farmers plant them into heavily compacted fields, let the roots drive down deep, then roll the plants under in winter. The decomposing root leaves a channel behind it that loosens soil better than mechanical aeration. You can eat the harvest and improve the ground at the same time. Sow seeds 1/2 inch deep directly into your rockiest bed, thin to 3 inches apart. Don't work the stones out first. Leave them. Don't add nitrogen. Rich soil pushes all the energy into fast, soft top growth. The resistance of rocky ground is exactly what drives it downward. The number 6. Collard greens. Does your clay stay waterlogged for days after rain? Does it sit cold and heavy well into spring, rotting anything with a delicate root system? Collard greens were developed in exactly those conditions and never really left them. Most leafy greens, spinach, chard, even kale, struggle in waterlogged clay because oxygen can't reach shallow roots. Collards run deeper and handle temporary saturation without rotting. And the low fertility typical of dense clay actually concentrates flavor. High nitrogen soil produces big, fast, pale leaves. Lean clay produces smaller, darker, more nutrient-dense ones. The insider fact: collard greens have been cultivated for over 2,000 years, and the varieties that survived weren't grown in ideal conditions. They were grown in the worst fields, by people who had no means to improve them. That's the entire reason they're still here. Plant seedlings, not seeds, 18 inches apart after last frost. Don't fertilize at planting. Once established, feed once with something low nitrogen like bone meal. Too much nitrogen early pushes soft growth that splits badly in cold, wet clay. Let the soil work first. If those felt like solid backup options, the next 3 are the entries that change how you think about difficult ground entirely. Number 5. Amaranth. Compacted, nutrient-stripped, bone-dry, and cracking at the edges. The kind of ground that looks like it belongs in a drought documentary. Amaranth treats that as a baseline condition. Amaranth is a C4 plant. Its photosynthesis operates more efficiently under heat and moisture stress than the mechanism used by most vegetables. While your tomatoes, beans, and cucumbers slow down and close their leaf pores when it gets hot and dry, amaranth accelerates. The harder your summer gets, the wider the performance gap opens between amaranth and everything else in the same bed. The insider fact: amaranth was a primary calorie crop for Aztec civilization. Grain and greens harvested from the same plant, grown across soil conditions that would fail most modern gardens. Spanish colonizers deliberately suppressed it after conquest. Controlling the food supply meant eliminating crops that produced independently of managed farmland. This is a vegetable that was banned specifically because it was too self-sufficient to control. Direct sow onto the soil surface after your last frost date. Don't bury the seed, it needs light to germinate. Thin to 12 inches apart once seedlings reach 3 inches. Add nothing to the bed. Fertilizer at any stage pushes tall, leggy growth and drops leaf production. Dry, stripped ground keeps it compact and consistently productive. If any of these surprised you, drop the word poor in the comments right now. It helps me see who's watching all the way through, and it tells me what to cover in part 2. Number 4. Salsify. Thin, stony, almost skeletal ground. The kind where you hit pale chalk or gravel just a few inches down, is where salsify builds the root that made it famous. Called the oyster plant, and if you've never eaten one pulled from mineral-poor stony soil in late autumn, you're missing something with no real comparison in a modern garden. Roasted or gently steamed, the flesh carries a quiet, clean savoriness, something between a parsnip and a freshly shucked oyster, with a sweetness that only develops after cold weather reaches the roots. Grow it in rich, well-amended ground, and that flavor nearly disappears. The mineral edge, the oceanic undertone, those are products of lean soil and cold. You can't buy them, you can only grow for them. The insider fact: salsify was one of the most common vegetables in European kitchens from the 16th through the 19th century. It vanished not because it's difficult, but because it takes 120 days to mature, and commercial supply chains can't support that timeline. It didn't disappear from gardens. It disappeared from memory. Sow seeds half an inch deep in your thinnest, stoniest bed, thinning to 4 inches apart. Add nothing. No compost, no manure. Rich soil triggers forking that ruins both texture and flavor. Leave the stones in place and harvest after the first frost. Number 3. Scarlet runner bean. Nitrogen-stripped, depleted, exhausted ground that's failed every crop you've put in it. Stop fighting it for one season. Plant scarlet runner beans and let them rebuild it while they feed you. Runner beans are nitrogen fixers. Bacteria colonize their roots and pull atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil. But in severely depleted ground, the deficit pushes the root system into overdrive, depositing more than they would in already fertile soil. The worse your starting point, the harder the plant works to correct it. The insider fact: the seed itself is one of the most striking in any kitchen garden. Deep purple-black, marbled with burgundy, larger than any common bean you've handled. But beyond appearance, young runner beans, picked small and eaten fresh, have a rich, almost meaty sweetness that supermarkets simply can't deliver. They deteriorate within hours of harvest. That gap between vine and table is something only a home grower ever closes. Direct sow 2 inches deep, 6 inches apart, with support in place before planting. Add nothing. No fertilizer, no compost. Depleted soil triggers maximum nitrogen fixation. After the season, cut plants at ground level and leave the roots in the soil. You're not just growing a crop. You're building the conditions for everything that comes after. The next 2 entries are the ones most people have genuinely never considered. They're also the ones that perform the most consistently across the widest range of poor soil conditions. And one of them is the answer to the stat from the opening. Before we get to the top 2, and trust me, you want to stay for those, I want to say something I wish someone had said to me about 3 years ago, before I lost an entire season fighting plants that were never going to work in my soil. Knowing which vegetables thrive in poor ground is the first problem. And today, you're solving it. But there's a second problem that doesn't show up until after you've solved the first one, and it quietly costs you just as much. Empty beds. You plant your poor soil crops in the right window. They perform exactly the way we're describing, and then the season turns. The bed clears. And without a plan in place for what follows, what goes in next, when and in which order, that same ground that just worked for you sits doing nothing for weeks or months. The soil's potential doesn't disappear when the crop does, but the planting window does, and those windows don't come back until next year. That's exactly the problem the year-round harvest blueprint exists to solve. It's a complete succession planting system, 128 pages covering seasonal crop selection, back-to-back planting schedules, and how to keep something productive in your beds across every season, including the ones most gardeners write off entirely. It's designed around real gardens with real limitations, which means it works whether you're managing poor soil, limited space, or a short growing window. For what you get, a full-year planning system, a seasonal sowing calendar, and the companion bonus planning pack that lets you map your beds month by month. That price is low on purpose. Because an empty bed in August costs you more in missed harvests than this guide costs once. There's also a full money-back guarantee. If you don't find it useful, you get your money back. No friction. The link is in the description and pinned comment. If you are watching on TV, bring out your phone and open your camera app to scan the QR code being displayed on your screen currently. If today's list has already changed how you're thinking about your ground, this is the next step that turns that knowledge into a full season, not just a single planting. Now, back to the countdown, because entry number 2 is one that almost nobody considers, and it might be the most consistent performer on this entire list. Number 2, skirret. Waterlogged, cold, heavy ground that rots root crops before they size up. Skirret was bred for exactly that environment, across centuries of northern European winters, and then almost completely forgotten. Skirret produces clusters of slender white roots rather than a single taproot, which means waterlogging that would rot a carrot or parsnip simply can't take hold the same way. There's no single point of failure. One root in the cluster softens, and the rest carry on. It's an architectural solution to a drainage problem, built in by centuries of cultivation, in the worst kitchen garden conditions available. The flavor is something genuinely difficult to describe to anyone who hasn't grown it. Sweet, starchy, with a clean floral edge that intensifies after cold weather reaches the bed. It was a staple of medieval European kitchens, prized enough to appear in royal household records, and it vanished not because anything better replaced it, but because industrialized agriculture couldn't standardize it. Every cluster grows differently. For a commercial operation, that's a problem. For your garden, it's irrelevant. Direct sow half an inch deep in autumn or early spring, 6 inches apart. Don't improve drainage before planting. Don't add compost. Skirret's cluster structure evolves specifically in wet, heavy ground. Dry it out or enrich it, and you lose the adaptation that makes it reliable. Number 1, Scorzonera. And here's where we pay off the stat from the opening. Scorzonera, black salsify, entirely different from the oyster plant at number 4, has been measured sending its taproot over 6 feet into compacted, nutrient-poor ground. Not in spite of the conditions, because of them. The biological mechanism is direct. Mineral scarcity triggers auxin production in the root tip, which drives accelerated downward growth as the plant hunts deeper soil horizons. Give Scorzonera rich, loose, well-fed ground, and the root stops early. It has everything it needs within reach. Give it stripped, compacted, hostile ground, and it drills. The worse the soil, the deeper the investment. That's not toughness. That's a survival system you can harvest. The roots, pulled after frost and roasted or sautéed gently in butter, carry a flavor unlike anything in a modern supermarket. Dark, faintly smoky, mineral-rich, somewhere between artichoke heart and roasted bone marrow. The black skin peels away to reveal cream-white flesh that oxidizes on contact with air, so drop cut pieces straight into lemon water. It takes a full growing season. It is worth every day of it. Sow seeds 3/4 of an inch deep in your most compacted bed, thinning to 4 inches. Add nothing. Leave the ground exactly as hard and stripped as it already is. The depth of your harvest depends entirely on how inhospitable that soil stays. That's your number 1. So here's what today actually was. It wasn't a list of vegetables that survive bad soil. Every single entry on this countdown does something more specific than that. It takes the exact condition most gardeners are trying to fix and uses it as the trigger for better performance. Compaction drives roots deeper. Alkalinity concentrates flavor compounds. Stripped nitrogen pushes fixation into overdrive. Waterlogging selects for cluster architecture that eliminates single points of failure. Drought stress builds sugar. The problem was never the soil. The problem was the pairing. Decades of gardening advice built around the assumption that all vegetables want the same thing. Rich, loose, well-fed, well-drained ground. Left anyone without that setup thinking they were starting at a disadvantage. You weren't. You were just growing the wrong plants in the right conditions. Every difficult soil type on this list has at least one vegetable that was shaped by exactly those conditions, over decades or centuries of cultivation, specifically because that environment produced something better than easier ground could. That's not a consolation. That's a selection advantage most gardeners never use, because nobody points them toward it. Now you know where to point. If you're taking one thing away from today, your worst bed, the one you've been avoiding, amending, or apologizing for, is someone's ideal growing condition. Find the match and leave the soil exactly as it is. Tell me in the comments, which one are you trying first? Or if you've been sitting on a patch of ground that's defeated everything you've put in it, describe it. Clay, chalk, gravel, hard pan, whatever it is, drop it below. There's a decent chance something on this list was made for it. If this is the kind of gardening content you want more of, practical, specific, and built around what actually works rather than what looks good in a raised bed, subscribe. New videos go up every week. I'll see you in the next one.